Hi, everybody. I'm Dan Cooper, your host for today. Welcome to the Sharpen Podcast, brought to you by Acumen, an exclusive community for CEOs and business owners to help you grow your top line, optimize your bottom line, and enrich your storyline. It's one of the hardest things to accomplish as your business grows, working on versus in the business, getting out of the daily whirlwind, the production mindset to work on those important and not urgent things. We'll dive into that on versus in tension, along with what it's like to be an intrapreneur inside a large enterprise, which is basically like being an entrepreneur. Today, my guest is Jeff Phillips, the Chief Lending Officer for Landmark National Bank and Market President of Kansas City. He's been an Acumen member on the Velocity team for over 3 years, and we've had a banking relationship for much longer than that. When we met, I still had hair, and now I don't. And he's the best dressed non-suit wearing banker I know. So if you're watching the video, feast your eyes on that. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Hey Dan, it's good to see you. I had hair. I had the same amount of hair. It's just now it's here on my chin instead of on my head. But yes, those were the glory days for us.
That's funny. It's both moved down our face.
Yes,
That's
that's right.
when I remember when.
Yeah.
All right, so give us the 90-second elevator. Who is Landmark Bank and what do you do?
Yeah, thanks. Well, appreciate being on. So Landmark National Bank is a community bank based mostly in Kansas. We've got a little entree into Missouri and Casey Mo, but banks like to talk about how big they are. That's people are supposed to know what that means, so I'll say it. We're 1.6 billion, but really what that means is we've got roughly 30 locations in about 25 markets. We are a true community bank, so we are working primarily with folks that are in their community that are trying to do things. A lot of that is business owners, but also folks that are just kind of champions for what's happening in their specific, corner of the world and trying to make things happen. And we, offer all the normal things that banks offer, but it feels like we've got this really powerful network that we like to say kind of has a shared value. And those shared values are they're really kind of learners. They understand the power of connection, and they're really kind of these catalysts in their communities. They're kind of putting their resources where their mouth is, trying to make things happen.
It's good. I love that word catalyst.
Oh, yeah.
So what do? You have a couple of titles. What's that about?
Yeah, so one of them I've had for a while, the market president for Kansas City, and that's really just kind of leading our efforts here. We had a nice little foothold in Kansas City over the years, but the last probably 6 or 7, we've really kind of been able to put that in hyperdrive, and so that's been a lot of fun leading those efforts. But then Chief Lending Officer in our world is you're kind of heading up kind of 4 specific areas. One is the commercial teams. So all of our market presidents that lead commercial teams, I help lead them. They're really good at the financing side. We also have a group called Treasury Management that are folks that are dedicated to the deposit side. So they help how you get paid and pay people and protecting your cash. And then we have a group that really supports those folks, both of those folks, in working with customers. And then also the consumer loan aspect. So how we loan money to individuals, which ends up mostly being those business owners as well. And a lot of times, as you know, there's kind of just one pocket of money that's both the business and the personal. And so it kind of works out that we know both sides of those equations and can approach them from different ways.
Cool. So you and I have talked about in times past this on the business versus in the business. And as your role evolved and transitioned, you're like, man, that's a funny mentality. And you don't know it until you know it. And once you know it, it's like, oh my gosh. So where were you when this idea hit you? And what was going on at the time?
Yeah. Well, it's funny. You and I were visiting before we started recording, and it's about, it's one thing to be this sophisticated person that can share the wisdom to people that other people have told you. But when you have to start eating your own cooking, it gets really hard. So
That's
I
right.
think I first heard the on the business, not in the business through E-Myth. and maybe read that. I don't know how long ago that was. That's in our landmark library because that's one of those pivotal books. But you know, we often help business owners kind of navigate that because a lot of them are founder led. And so they are the best salesperson, they're the product specialist, they're the best executor. And it ends up always kind of bottlenecking there at with them. Kind of the difference about the working on the business is really whenever you start thinking strategically about where the business is headed, looking around corners for trends and things like that. And for me, we were this little scrappy deal in Kansas City, and I was primarily focused on getting business and working directly with customers. And I love it. And it's very fulfilling. But as my role kind of expanded and our team expanded, then you have to start shifting at some point. And that wasn't a super easy transition, but there were a few things that I started kind of implementing that really ultimately helped me make that transition a little bit smoother.
So let's start at the first point, and then we'll go like to the actual transition. How did you know something needed to change?
Yeah. Yeah. I think it was, whenever you're trying to bang out that email at 10:30 at night or whatever, and you haven't eaten dinner yet, and then you realize you hadn't eaten lunch either, and you're like, something's got to change. But also, I think really it's having, good friends around to give advice. So I mean, Acumen is a great example of that, right? Where you kind of are giving a state of the union about where your company is and what challenges you're facing. And it seems like from the outside looking in for any of us, you zero in on that real quick and say, well, why are you making that decision? Or why is that depending on you to move forward? Or why do all those workflows land in your inbox? That's stupid. And you see it when it's not you, but when it's you, it's a little bit harder to see.
So when you decided to make the change, what did you do?
Yeah. Yeah, some of it was silly. I mean, is silly in that it's seems super simple, but it was really kind of hard. One was I just scheduled time for strategy on my calendar and scheduled it for the whole year. So it was like, hey, every 3 weeks or every 6 weeks, whatever it is, there's this 4 hour block of time, and it's not movable. And so, things would come up and it's like, hey, I really need to see you here. And it's like, I'm sorry, that is booked. And I would go away. I would go away from the office. And, the first few times I sat down, I had all this stuff swimming about to-dos and, oh, I need to call so-and-so and I need to write that one thing. And I tried to hold that back. But then I realized that each time I sat down in those strategy sessions, if I would just spend 15 minutes, 10 minutes writing those things down, there was a lot less up there than I thought there was about that kind of stuff. And I could get it off and close that window. And then really it was just kind of thinking about the broader view of where are we headed? How is our team doing? What gaps do we have? What kind of data am I getting from customers that would kind of inform where we should spend our resources? And so that's been super helpful. And then I think the other thing, Dan, is I kind of redefined what a successful week is. When you're in the trenches and you're selling, like it's all about like, what did you get done? What did you push across the finish line? And being able to kind of transition that to where I'm not actually responsible for the doing, I'm responsible for the making sure that things move forward. Um, that was a mental shift, but once I could make that mental shift, then that kind of really opened up the floodgates for me. But there's been some stuff that I really had to change a lot about, like kind of how I gather data and how I see what our customer needs are and things like that I'm still trying to figure out.
When what got you here, which was production and having a semblance of control and customers, which it won't get you there. How did you deal with not being in the trenches daily?
Yeah, it's really hard. And I mean, it's one thing, like I still have, very loyal friends and customers. I kind of call them friendstomers. that I get to work with. And so I'm very appreciative of that. But I think the biggest gap was that I didn't realize how much I was gathering data from them just in casual conversations. So having those coffees, talking about their business, you would see these reoccurring themes come up. And it was like, oh, succession planning is a really big issue for privately held businesses right now, or, you name it, a fractional CFO. Should I do that? All these issues would come up. And so I really kind of had to shift where, I'm still asking, I'm probably asking more questions today than I ever have before, but I'm just asking it to a different audience. So I'm asking it to our leaders who I'm trying to coach up as to that they should be asking those kind of questions of our customers. And then I can kind of pose some hypotheses to them in kind of our group settings, see how that lands. So I'm still doing the same process. It just looks a little bit different, and it's not coming maybe as natural as it was before.
Yeah. So you mentioned one time that you're learning how to coach the coaches. Is that what you mean by that?
Yeah, that's a lot of it. I mean, it's one thing to have somebody side by side with you and you kind of coach a selling or a servicing technique, some tricks of the trade, but really now kind of coaching, here's how you lead a team. That has been, I think I approached it maybe the way I wanted to be coached, which is, hey man, just go out there and you're naturally gifted, just make it happen. And I received a lot of feedback around, what would be kind? It would be kind if you would tell me exactly the playbook and give me the form and let me execute on that. And then let me start playing jazz once I've got the basics. But just coach me on the basics right now. And so when you think through, that's really kind of changed how I communicate what I'm expecting. It's a little bit more boiled down, and I kind of view that as micromanaging, but in their eyes, it was like, no, this is helping me get established, and then I can kind of go from there.
Let's go to your team's further feedback. So you took the Superman cape off and you hung it up on the coat rack in the corner. How did they react to this new version of you that you're becoming?
Yeah. And I think, I really appreciate the um, candor that our team has. And so I had multiple people because I felt really guilty about, I didn't want to be a full-time administrator. Like I have like PTSD about seeing those people in companies I've worked in the past. And so I think I had some hangups about that. And I had several people that I work with that are part of the team that sat down and said, you know where we need you? We need you out there. We need you charging the hill. We need you looking around the corner to see where we're headed in the future. We need you knocking down the obstacles so we can do this other stuff. You are a force multiplier. You were a force, and now you're a force multiplier. We need you in that role. And whenever you're in the force role, you're not in the force multiplier role. That's actually hurting us. So do your job and be a force multiplier. And that actually was very freeing.
So if I were hearing you and I'm in the whirlwind and the chaos today, and I know I need to go from here to there, what advice would you give me to how to start this?
Ugh. Yeah. I would say no one's going to do it as good as you, and that's okay. Um, one of our friendstomers, she runs a gym for little kids, and she said she finally came to the realization that if you can do it 80% as well as I can, we're good. We're good to go. So just because somebody does it different than me doesn't make it wrong, but I think you do have to, go ahead and say, look, it's not, that email's not going to be the way you would have addressed it to a customer. They're not going to move as fast as you. It's not going to be the same coolness that you would have done it with, but you know what? That's okay. It's going to work.
It's all about mindset. We usually know how to pull the lever and turn the knob once we've decided that that's what we're going to do.
Yeah, you're right.
You just have to decide that's what you're going to do.
You're right.
Okay, so we said it's funny. You're as entrepreneurial as the rest of us, and yet you're in a larger organization. So the trendy word they give that is intrapreneur. Um, how do you do that, especially in a bank, which, as we all know, is full of compliance and governance and risk tolerances? I mean, all businesses are, but you really are. So how does that work?
Yeah. Well, since the this recording might be picked up by any of our friendly regulators, I would like to say I really appreciate their efforts and welcome them and thank them so much for their guidance and their wisdom that they do offer. It is. I actually kind of had a little bit of imposter syndrome, Dan, when we first started talking about me joining Acumen, because I did feel like while we worked almost exclusively with owner operators, I didn't really view myself as kind of that um, entrepreneur. And I think what you helped me decide was, we were kind of starting a bank on the backbone of an existing bank. And so whenever you have responsibilities for, customer acquisition and branding and building out a team and lifting up the team and your processes and all those kind of things, well, that is a business. It just happens to be on the backbone of an existing business. And so, um, I think Jim Collins, that's a oldie but a goodie, but he talks about that real leadership is not focused on their career trajectory, but they're focused on how they can deliver at the unit level, and then letting that kind of prove out their advancement. I think once you kind of say, hey, um, this little sphere of influence that I have, if I can own it and be invested in it and just treat it as if I'm the shepherd of it for this point in time, that that really scratches that entrepreneurial itch. And there's definitely some, like some um, disciplines that you have to think about when you're talking about running a business within a business. But I found it to be very fulfilling.
How does everyone else feel about the internal entrepreneur?
At the bank,
Oh yeah.
yeah. Well, I think it's about approach, because it's one thing if you kind of draw a fence and you say, this is mine and I'm going to run it the way I want to run it. It's another thing if you say, um, hey, I want I want to be a proving ground. I want to serve as a lab. Um, I know you would appreciate, being in the lab with a pen and a pad. But I want to be a lab where we can try some things out. Another Jim Collins thing is fire bullets before cannonballs, right? So let's fire some bullets in this lab of mine, and let's create some indicators and get some data that we can then deploy to the larger, and it will complement where we are headed as an organization as a whole, not a side venture, not something completely off the rails, but let's use us as a way to prove out things in maybe less risk of failure, and then we can deploy it on a broader scale.
It's good stuff. You're unique in that you can quote Jim Collins and Dr. Dre both within the same paragraph, which is what something I've always loved about you. So bonus question, we're a plain glass organization, Acumen is, right? People, performance, profit, excellence. If you can't run a good business, it doesn't matter what you believe. And yet we have this belief, this stained glass heart, which is this faith thing, a Jesus journey, as we like to call it, because we're all on it. We're just trying the best we can to live the values and build our relationship with Him. So, how does that manifest for you and in the business?
Yeah. Obviously, I lift up any challenges that we have within our business in prayer. And I ask for guidance and how, God would want me to interact in certain situations, or how I can share his comfort in compassion. And I guess I think about like in 2 Corinthians, it's kind of leading up to where it's talking about how God's comfort and compassion can like work through people, really work through their hearts. And then it talks about that, you're potentially going to get comfort in your troubles so that you can comfort those when they're in their troubles. But the key part of that is like with the comfort we ourselves have received from God. So I think what I try to do is try to love on people in a very acceptable way, in a corporate setting, but try to love on them in the way that I have received that compassion and that love and that patience, and let him kind of work through me in that way.
Right on. He's hip hop, he's banker, he's businessman, he's intrapreneur, he's entrepreneur, and he comes alongside people in love and compassion. He is Jeff Phillips. Man, where can your listeners find out more about you, man?
Well, that is very kind of you to make the offer. We are at banklandmark.com, but you can find me on LinkedIn, and would love a chance to hear more about your story. And so don't be afraid to reach out.
So if you are interested in becoming a member of Acumen, go to acumenimpact.com and click on the apply button. Or if you'd like to learn more, we have a ton of great content under the resources tab. Jeff Phillips, you rock. This is fun, and I appreciate you, man.
Appreciate you, Dan. Thank you so much.
Oh.